morning and welcome to day 44 of Geriatric 1944's Coronavirus Diaries. It's all down to numbers, isn't it? In a second, I want to talk about birds. But before I do that, the news today, this morning, Wednesday, is that Neil Ferguson, the professor who's been advising the government, I call him the prophet of doom, because in the past he's been suggesting that all sorts of millions of people were going to die from SARS and then from MERS or swine flu or bird flu or whatever. And he, of course, had been busily suggesting that 50 million people will die of coronavirus, basically because he's a media darling and he loves being on television and he likes to put across the worst possible scenario, which is fine, and let him do it. It's the kind of thing we've been doing in the music industry for years. Just what I used to do in the good old days when I started Chart Hype. But actually, when it has its effect, as it has done, on the government and on the way they behave, then we're in real trouble. That's what happened when I invented Chart Hype. It was mainly just to push the best records. I couldn't afford to do the huge advertising campaigns that the major labels were doing back in the 70s. So I came up with ideas that cost virtually nothing, but that managed to get the record high in the charts. Unfortunately, after a few months, the major record labels sussed this and started doing it themselves, with the wrong records, with all sorts of giveaways that I couldn't afford, solid gold watches and things like that given to retailers. And the result was it ruined the charts. It made the charts completely non-reflective of popular taste and culture. And as a result, things like Top of the Pops ratings dropped alarmingly, and eventually the show got cancelled. The whole music industry suffered and almost died because of something I'd started with the best intentions that worked very well for me in the early days. Well, the same thing has been going on when the media inflated the amount of sex abuse and made ordinary things like saying to somebody, fancy a coffee, into attempted rape because it was all a good story. Fine, who cares what the papers say? But when it started affecting the law and people started going to prison for various crimes that never took place, like me, for example, it really became shit. Well, that's what's happened here with the coronavirus scandal. The media picked up this trivial virus in China that for 95% of people has really little or no effect, but for 5% can be very serious and even lethal, boosted into a plague, and were assisted by people like Professor Neil Ferguson and his stupid models about how appalling the world was going to be, and the stupid government behaved saying, yeah, that's right, we must clamp down, we'll do a lockdown, we'll stop everybody doing everything, and the repercussions are going to be far worse than they ever would have been for coronavirus. Look at South Korea, who sensibly looked at the reality, took sensible precautions without any lockdown or damage to the economy, with a population of 51 million, managed to end up with 250 deaths, and are actually coping with this unpleasant virus for a few people, like flu is, very well indeed. Instead, our government, and also the governments of Italy, Spain, France, and a few others, have gone the wrong way. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Donald Trump in America. I actually think he's doing the right thing, the way he's dealing with it, but is that going to be correct? We'll have to see. Only history will tell. Anyway, birds. I go down to the Serpentine every day. My exercise after I've bought my groceries is to walk through the park. It's about a 20-minute walk in all, and I sit by the Serpentine and I feed the birds. And it's quite amusing to see how different birds react. The swans usually stay in the water and only take the things that I toss hard in their direction. Some of the geese are really sweet and friendly, come up and actually take it from my fingers. One of them is very careful not in any way to peck me. That's the goose I like best. Very thoughtful. If I'm holding it wrong, it sort of shakes its head until I hold a little bit of bread in the right way before it can take it without touching my skin. The little pigeons down below just squabble and fight around what pieces land on the earth. And the seagulls come in and squawk and try and grab a bit here and there. And the ravens or the crows push the pigeons out of the way to get their bits on the ground. But my favourite birds have been a bird I had no idea what they were. They're much smaller than the others, and they're terribly fast and really efficient. So if I threw a bit of bread into the air, they'd fly up in the air and catch it, no matter how far or how fast I threw it, before it could hit the ground. And as a result, got an awful lot of the bread, because I started aiming it at them, because this so fascinated me. Well, I took a couple of photographs of the birds, and I put it online, and I approached my baby brother Andy, who's an expert on birds, and found out that these were starlings, European starlings. And I learnt from my online site that not only do they have beaks that are black in the winter but that turn yellow or gold in the summer, they have little red legs and they're terribly pretty. I thought starlings were all black. Starlings, of course, do that wonderful murmuration thing in the air, you know, when they all group together and fly in sync, which I've always found absolutely fascinating. So I've now got very, very friendly with my local serpentine starlings. There's quite a lot of them. I think there's a nest there, and quite a lot of little baby starlings who are only tiny little things, but still incredibly efficient at catching stuff halfway in the air. I'm very fond of them. They're very sweet. Anyway, I want to finish off today with a track of mine that's caused a lot of fuss for anybody who's heard it, because everybody these days is getting rather religious and going out in their gardens and singing Amazing Grace. Well, I did a version of Amazing Grace back in the 70s, which is quite unusual. Have a listen and see what you think. See you tomorrow.